3 for the American Guild of Organists, of which I am currently the Grand Poobah. One of the perks of being the Grand Poobah is that when you're offered a little lanyap for someone's church, you can sort of choose it for your own. So Ms. Parker is going to work with you this morning, the congregation, in something that she calls hearing the congregational voice. So you all get to be guinea pigs for this marvelous creative lady. I hope you will join me in welcoming her, and I hope that if you can this afternoon, come to our concert. There are details in your bulletin about it. It's at 3 o'clock downtown. So would you join me in welcoming Alice Parker?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here on several counts. I come from Western Massachusetts, where the temperatures last week were below 0, so this feels positively balmy. I'm also very much at home in a Presbyterian church. My mother was Scottish Presbyterian from Greenville, South Carolina, and her maiden name was Mary Stewart. So we were brought up on Scottish history and Presbyterian history, and it feels lovely to be back with you all. I also come as a representative of a tradition which is long past, but which is very much part of our American heritage, and that is the spread of the settlers as they moved west, as they were arriving across the ocean from Europe. As they moved west and settled in either by themselves or in tiny little communities in the hills and on the plains, they often had a visiting preacher who would ride around to several churches on a Sunday, because there wouldn't have been somebody living close by who could do that. And almost always that preacher had riding with him from place to place a song leader, because they didn't have any music except what they made themselves. There weren't any recordings or radios or MP3s. They just had to make it themselves. And so they took it very seriously in a way that we haven't for a long time, with our advantages of these beautiful buildings and the mighty organs and the excellent choirs, hymnals. They didn't have any of that. They had to start from scratch. And starting from scratch in singing is, for me, the sound that I want to hear from the congregation. All those other things are extras. But if the congregation hears its own voice and enters in, that's the heart of worship. Because even the Bible says, even the prophets say, even the people who put these hymnals together all knew that words are one thing, but words united with song are something else. It touches our hearts in a way that the words themselves can't, and give us a way to become one voice as a congregation. So I'm going to teach you some of the hymns in the hymnal that may or may not be familiar, but I think you'll find it interesting. Open your hymnals, please, to number 261. If you look at the very small print at the very bottom of the page, it tells you that this tune comes from the Genevan Psalter, 1551. That was exactly the beginning days of the Reformation of Calvin in Geneva. The language was French, and they had versions of the Psalms which were translated into French poetry by some of the eminent French poets of the day. And the tunes, all the tunes of that early Reformation are what we think of today as madrigals, or early music with recorders and lutes and that charming sound that you get from those early instruments. So if you think of this hymn as a madrigal, I can sing in my very it's a very congregational voice. That's what I have. It's not a solo voice. So if it gives out somewhere, it's partly my age. But I will sing you the first line. It's called Leading Out. I will sing you the first line, and you echo it back. Peoples, clap your hands, bow to God with joy. Peoples, clap your hands, shout to God with joy. Listen again. Peoples, clap your hands, shout to God with joy. Peoples, clap your hands, shout to God with joy. King of all the earth is the Lord Most High. King of all the earth is the Lord Most High. All humanity stands in awe of God. All humanity stands in awe of God. With a mighty hand God brings nations low. With a mighty hand God brings nations low. And beneath our feet cast down every foe. And beneath our feet cast down every foe. Our inheritance comes from God the Lord. Our inheritance comes from God the Lord. I'm going to do that again because I did it wrong. Our inheritance comes from God the Lord. Our inheritance comes from God the Lord. Not hard to sing, and it bounces along. In fact, it has a distinctly jazzy kind of flavor. It's the way everyone sang then. They would sit around the kitchen table and sing. There are wonderful early hymnals, the Scottish hymnals, which are part of your tradition too, where on one side of the page of the hymnal would be a soprano part by itself and a bass part by itself, and on the facing page would be an alto part by itself and the tenor part by itself, but the facing page was upside down. It looks absolutely crazy until you think, if this book was in the middle of a table with a soprano and bass on one side and an alto tenor on the other side, then in one book you had all the separate parts. And they weren't all neatly together like this that you could play on the piano. You saw only your own part. So it just shows how much in people's lives that they sang at home around the table as well as in church. So it was almost the most sophisticated age of singing that we've ever had, where people were really singing. Take that first verse again without my lining out, and we'll go on to the second verse and just feel this wonderful swing that it has to it. Just unison, please. Don't try any parts. Peoples, clap your hands, shout to God with joy. Sing of all the earth is the Lord Most High. All humanity stands in awe of God. With a mighty hand God brings nations low. And beneath our feet cast down every foe. Our inheritance comes from God the Lord. God ascends the throne with a joyful cry, and with trumpet sound has gone up on high. Sing your praise to God, sing with joyful voice. Rulers, peoples, now join in serve the Lord. For the mighty ones call belong to God, who exalted reigns now with psalms rejoice. And you may not realize it, but you have just recited all of Psalm 47. It's a lovely way to do the Psalms. Instead of listening to someone read or reading responsively, you're singing together. And the more we sing together, the better we learn to listen to each other's voices, to become one voice. Turn now, please, to hymn number 72, 7-2. I was quite well along in years before I realized that these hymnals are not just wonderful aids to worship, a wonderful part of worship, but they're historical anthologies of poetry and tunes, also geographical with all of our interest in world music these days, now that we can travel to any part of the world almost instantaneously with our electronic devices, and within a day or two with airplanes and fast modes of travel. So the world has shrunk. That globe we saw in the children's story has shrunk incredibly, so that at any service like this one, there could be someone here from any continent. It could be many different languages and heritages present. And our hymnody reflects this. Our hymnals have in them many more hymns from around the world and different cultures. This is a lovely example. Reading small print again, you get the music is a Latvian melody. And I had a wonderful chance to talk with a young Latvian woman who was doing the children's music in a church I was visiting, and asked her about this melody. I said, is this one that people know? And she said, oh, everyone knows this melody. And I said, well, what are the words that you sing? Is it about Babylon? And she said, no, this is part of our great epic that tells our history, a long, long poem that tells the history. And the words that they sing are about the winter, and two little children are wandering around begging for food, and they can find neither food or shelter. And you start shivering when you picture that. And then she sang me this tune, and it was very much slower than I ever would have thought of doing it myself. And it suits the Babylon people. It's almost the hymn of the homeless, the hymn of people who are displaced. Let me line it out. By the Babylonian rivers we sat down in grief and wept. By the Babylonian rivers we sat down in grief and wept, hung our harps upon the willow, mourned for Zion while we slept, hung our harps upon the willow, mourned for Zion when we slept. You can feel how the mood in the room has changed from that lovely jazzy bounce in the Genevan Psalter tune to this melody which keeps going down, which takes us down into this mournfulness. We can't read all of the Bible with a joyful, happy bounce. There are texts and there are tunes that take us into every human emotion, and it allows us again to experience it together, to feel ourselves put into this position where we look around us at the world and see it differently. We look out of the eyes of the dispossessed. So sing again the other two verses. If you feel like harmonizing, it's very simple, familiar harmonizing, so try harmonizing. If you do that, there's no such thing as a wrong note. Whatever note you land on is the right one. But the main thing is that most of us sing the melody and we keep it going. These lovely words. Second verse. There are captors in derision, did require of us a song. So we sat with staring vision, and the days were hard and long. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange and bitter land? Can our voices veil the sorrow? Lord God, hold your holy band. One of the troubles with our wonderful contemporary hymnals is that every page looks the same. You kind of flick through it and you think, oh, they're all hymns. But the hymns are just as individual as we are as human beings. Each one has its own mood and tempo, its source that it's based on, the place that people came from. All hymns are ethnic They come from some place first that people sang them. So the more hymns that we know and the more we sing them together, the wider our experience is, not only of Christianity, but of just being human beings, of inhabiting this world together. Turn, please, to page 822. Is this one familiar to any of you? I rather like it when they're not, because I have the feeling of giving you the hymnal as if I were giving you a 5-pound box of chocolates and say, here, pick one, eat. It's a lovely song, and I'm going to do it in Spanish because the Spanish words are easy, but reading Spanish is fairly simple because it reads pretty much the way our English pronunciation would go. Pues si vivimos, para él vivimos. Try it. Pues si vivimos, para él vivimos. Y si morimos, para él morimos. Y si morimos, para él morimos. Sea que vivamos o que moramos. Sea que vivamos o que moramos. Somos del Señor, somos del Señor, somos del Señor, somos del Señor. When we're living, we belong to God. When we're dying, we belong to God. So whether we're living or dying, we belong to God. We are from the Lord. Wonderful text, and we've just done it in a way that kind of teaches us the notes that are here. But this is a Spanish song. When you think of Spanish folk songs, what do you think in your mind? What's the picture that comes up to you? I see a woman in skirts and swirling costume with castanets in her hand and going up. What kind of instruments accompanying? Guitars? You know, wonderful, that kind of sound. And are people sitting very still and listening? No, they're all moving. So let's get some of that rhythm going. Think of this kind of a rhythm. Could you forget just for a moment that you're sitting in church and put yourself back in kindergarten, and there's a big box of toys, you know, rhythm instruments under the piano that get passed around. Car keys are a wonderful rhythm instrument. Please don't stamp your feet or rap on the pews because that ties us down too much. But make all kind of noises with your mouth. It's called mouth percussion. It's a technical term, mouth percussion. Ching dong, tri, pa, pa 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 tika, ta ching cha cha ta dong, ti dong. Come on, get it going. More dong, ti taka taka tika, ta ti dong dong. Some of you keep that going, and I'm going to sing the first verse again. See what happens. Con si vivimos para él vivir. You can join me if you like. Y si morimos, para él morimos. Sea que vivamos o que moramos. Somos del Señor, somos del Señor. And I like to sing the last two lines again. Sea que vivamos o que moramos. Somos del Señor, somos del Señor. Now, if I knew you a little bit better, I'd invite you to stand up and move out in the aisles and dance to this hymn, because that's what you really should be doing. I see Presbyterian long faces looking at me. If I suggest this at my own tiny little Congregational church in rural Massachusetts, the men shrink down into the pews as if they wish they could disappear. who answers? The people that answer are the kids. They'll go right out in the aisle and do it, and I think partake of the joy of the hymn in a different way than we do as we just sing it. But this is really so much fun. Let's just do that first verse about 3 times more. See if we can get some harmony going. If altos and basses have the melody and tenors and sopranos go a third above, it works pretty well. Or you could pretend you're an instrument, like dum, 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 boom, dum, 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 dum. There are lots of things you could do if you want to try. I'll keep the melody going just for the one verse, so you don't have to think about words. But see if we can get something going. Let's start with rhythm each time to get that lovely dancing. The more you move your bodies, move something. Your shoulders, your arms, your toes, wiggle some way so that you get the music, the rhythm in your bodies. And pues si vivimos, para él vivimos, y si morimos, para él morimos, sea que vivamos o que moramos, somos del Señor, somos del Señor. Last 2 lines. Sea que vivamos o que moramos, somos del Señor, somos del Señor. Rhythm and run. Here we go again. Pues si vivamos, more joyful, come on. Vivamos, y si morimos, para él morimos, sea que vivamos o que moramos, somos del Señor, somos del Señor, sea que vivamos o que moramos, somos del Señor, somos del Señor. That's about 2 on a scale of 10. You could get that much more relaxed and into it, and I think if you did this, a little bit of this every Sunday, you'd begin to be able to feel it. Let's take one more, please, from another wonderful tradition that we have. This is number 775. When I was in college long ago, one of my teachers told me that there was no real folk music in the United States because folk music depended on there being a peasant class. I've often responded to that in my mind since because it's ridiculous. The United States is full of folk music from all the peoples who came and settled it. So it's not just one indigenous folk tradition, which many of the European countries have, and the Asian and the African countries too. But it's a mixture. It's our melting pot. But I think the one true folk music that's arisen among us during our lifetimes, and the previous centuries, of course, is the Negro spiritual. One way of defining folk music is that nobody wrote it down. It kind of arose. Of course, somebody had to sing it first, but what they sang was so exactly right for the moment. They were singing words that were meaningful to the people right there in a rhythm that often reflected a work rhythm of digging or sawing or sewing, knitting, weaving, running a spinning wheel. There were songs that people sang for every occupation. And I think one of the indictments of our present age is that we've created an environment where song is impossible. A room full of people working at computers cannot join in a song together because they're doing things that are totally separate. Our children do not learn to interact with one another by sitting in front of a computer or any small device that separates them out. I remember as a child, anytime we went anywhere in the car, we sang all the way. And now each one of my grandchildren is sitting with earphones on listening to their own music. And it's so sad. We're losing the chance to teach them our culture, teach them the way the world works by singing songs together. So anytime you're with family, try to do that wonderful old custom of singing. I remember in the old days, whenever the Ladies' Aid met at church, they always sang a couple of hymns before the meeting. Any church group sang hymns. Our children don't hear hymns at home usually. Try to get that started again. But anyway, the spirituals arose out of those people. They were written down way long after they were originally sung. And they arose out of life situations which were very tough. But the amazing thing is that of the early ones we know, none of them complain. They all express this incredible faith. So here, if you think, for instance, of a chain gang, where your ankle is chained to the ankle of the person in front of you, and you have to walk exactly together, or your chain gets mixed up and you fall. And you have to work together. You're digging a rail bed and you have a pickaxe that you have to swing. You have to swing exactly together, or again, you just get lost. So the rhythm is paramount, and the prayer is paramount. I want Jesus to walk with me. Feel that swing of the pickaxe? Try it. I want Jesus to walk with me. I want Jesus to walk with me. Journey. Lord, I want Jesus to walk with me. The wonderful, almost the most important beat in this song is the one we don't sing on. Try this thing as if you're raising a heavy pickaxe over your shoulder and bringing it down and just everybody. Yeah. So if you can do that, it's everywhere a rest is, or in some places like that third measure, the notes are tied over. They shouldn't be tied over at all. That beginning of the third measure is a rest. The beginning of the first measure is a rest. So let's start. Some of you can just do this all the way through, and others of you sing the melody. But feel this duet between the song and the work. So start with a and I want Jesus to walk with me. I want Jesus to walk with me. Journey. Lord, I want Jesus to walk with me. Now, by just singing the melody, we can make a round out of it, just two parts. If you start, and then I'll bring you in, we sing exactly the same tune with the second words, in my trials, Lord, walk with me. Try it. In my trial, Lord, walk with me, Lord, walk with me. In my trial, in my trouble. Lord, walk with me. Lord, walk with me. When my heart feels brave, oh, Lord, I want thee, Lord, I want thee to walk with me, to walk with me. When I'm in trouble, when I'm in, Lord, walk with me, Lord, walk with me. When I'm in trouble, when I'm in trouble, Lord, walk with me, Lord, walk with me. When my head bowed in song, Lord, I want thee, Lord, I want thee to walk with me, to walk with me. Do you realize how differently we were using our voices for each one of these songs? There's no one way to sing. We often don't hear our own voices, hear the congregational voice when the choir is singing and the organ is playing and there's all this other sound in the room. But the congregational voice itself is the heart of worship. And if we open our ears to hear and our mouths to sing, we participate very deeply in the worship experience. Thank you very much. Thank you.